Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Weather, Climate, and the Boys of Summer, our latest webinar, AMS Weather Band, with Paul Gross and Chris Vagasky. We're going to talk all things weather, climate, and baseball tonight. We'll talk weather-related game delays, weather impact on player performance, changing climate affecting some of these things, and just see where we go with this discussion. For those of you joining us, if you have questions throughout the event, please use the Q&A window you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll just get going. I'm going to introduce our moderator tonight, Chris Vagasky, who's the manager of the Wisconsin Environmental Mesonet, which is a network of weather and soil monitoring stations across Wisconsin. In addition to developing a statewide weather station network in Wisconsin, Chris also conducts research with lightning data. Thank you both, Paul and Chris, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Eric, for hosting us, and thank you everybody who's joining us. I've got my Detroit Tigers colors on. I've got my ball and glove. I'm ready to go. We've got the World Series getting ready to kick off tomorrow between the Diamondbacks and the Rangers. So a lot of exciting baseball ahead of us still over the next week or so. And I'm joined tonight with one of a kind AMS member, Paul Gross. He's got the CBM, the CCM, and he's a fellow of the AMS. And he's been helping the Detroit Tigers ground crew for quite some time, and he's got some really great stories of supporting them. So, Paul, thank you for joining us tonight to help get us ready for some World Series baseball by talking about how weather and climate really do impact weather or impact baseball more than we may think.
You bet. And I'm excited about this World Series, too. I mean, a lot of people expected Texas to be there, but I don't think anybody expected Arizona to be there. So this is going to be a very, very interesting World Series. I'm really fired up. I can't wait to watch the games.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting one. As you were saying, Texas was right in there. Arizona came in as a wild card, beat the Brewers in the first round, and what I've been seeing now that I'm here in Wisconsin is if a team beats the Brewers in the playoffs, they usually go on to the World Series. So this happened again with the Diamondbacks. So if you want to go to the World Series, I think you get in against the Brewers and beat them, and then you're there.
Yeah, Chris Vagasky playing the karma card.
You gotta take what you can get sometimes in baseball. You get those streaks and those slumps, and you just got to get it at the right time. And, I think we've got a streak of good weather in Arizona for sure. The next couple of nights, the games are going to be in Texas, and it looks a little stormy there.
Yeah, it does. Cold front's going to come through. They have a pretty good chance for storms, particularly tomorrow night. But as you and I were talking about before the webinar, fortunately, both stadiums have roofs. And so the weather will not be an issue in terms of like delays or canceling games or things like that. I think the only thing that could possibly cause any kind of delay in Texas would be if there was a tornado warning or something. But aside from that, normal weather with a roof, you're not going to have a problem.
Yeah, I think that is a really important thing. We see weather impacting baseball time and time again. You've been working with the Tigers for a long time now. What do you see as some of the things that really have the biggest impacts on, especially getting a game going?
Well, obviously rain is the thing. I mean, generally in most areas, a game is not going to be canceled because of a temperature, heat, I should say. Now, we've had games that have been canceled because it's been too cold. We've had some of those in Detroit, as a matter of fact. But and this summer, and it's the first time I remember, all that wildfire smoke, we actually had some games, particularly in the Northeast, like the New York, Boston area, et cetera. We had some games that were postponed because the smoke was so thick that the air was so dangerously unhealthy that it just was sending a terrible message to the public where we're telling people, don't go outside, stay inside, have your air conditioning on. And yet they're the players out playing baseball in that stuff. So but for the main thing, for most cities that do not have domed stadiums, the big thing is rain. And a lot of people don't understand what goes into, first of all, even starting the game on time or not. Now, for most games, the home team's general manager makes the decision to start on time. So if there's rain, they'll be in contact. In the case of the Tigers, they'll obviously be in contact with me, and they have others that they check with as well. But I'm kind of their primary person they rely upon, and they will. They'll check with me and make a decision, because what a lot of people also don't realize is that pitchers take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to warm up before a game. And so if you're going to start a game, you could certainly, a pitcher, I guess, if you expect the rain to end, you could have a pitcher, I guess, warm up in the rain, but they tend to not like to do that. So they'll delay a start. But before that first pitch is thrown, it's the home team's general manager that makes that call. Now, there is one exception to that rule, and that's, obviously aside from the playoffs, I think, but during the regular season, the one exception is, let's say you're playing a team that's just going to be there once for the season. They're going to be there just for a 3-game series, and that's it for the whole season. And if you rain out one of those games now, to make up that game, that team has got to come back in on an off day, and you've got to do that in coincident with an off day that the Tigers have, for example, if it's our team, and it can be a scheduling mess to get a team to have to come back into town to make up that game. And so in those situations, Major League Baseball will generally have a large impact on deciding whether we're going to play that game or not. And obviously they want to try and get it in, but if it's going to be that complicated in terms of rescheduling, then MLB will generally make that decision whether to play the game or to start the game.
Yeah, there's a lot that really goes into that, and we've seen a few times where there maybe been some questionable decisions made on, do we start it, do we delay it, on both sides of it, where it gets delayed and then no rain appears, or it gets started and then right after it starts, you have a deluge or you have a thunderstorm right outside. So how many teams are working with meteorologists?
Well, I think they all have, first of all, MLB has a meteorology team that will watch all of the games for all of the teams. And then some teams, I think, may have their own. But with the Tigers, I've worked with them for many, many years, since Sparky Anderson was manager back in the 80s. And after that first pitch is thrown, the responsibility then goes to the umpire. The general manager doesn't have any say. Once that first pitch is thrown, it goes to the umpire. And some umpires are, let's say, we'll call it more proactive than others when it comes to rain and even dangerous weather approaching a stadium. And so that's when the team's going to be in contact with me a lot, generally over the phone. I have had season tickets for many years with my wife, and so sometimes I'm at the game and I'll go and talk to them in person. But generally, I'll be talking to the grounds crew chief, and she'll be talking to the umpire. And I've taught her a lot, so she knows to pull up her radar scope on the phone and show the umpire what I was talking about with a storm that's coming or something like that. But as I mentioned, some umpires are very proactive and some are not. And I'll tell you, Chris, there's a point in some situations where you're transitioning from just the inconvenience of stopping a baseball game to public safety. And that's the players on the field, that's the grounds crew on the field, and that's the fans in the stands. And so there are certain criteria with lightning that they will pull everybody off the field until the fans to go under the stands, under cover. But in some umpires, if you're pretty certain that a fairly sizable storm is approaching, some umpires will, if it's a convenient point in the game, like between innings, or it's, like I say, clean time for a break, they'll let the grounds crew get that tarp out before the storm hits. But there are some umpires that think they're God, quite frankly. And I've had experiences in the past where I told them that there is no question that they're going to get hit with a strong to severe storm. I gave them the time, and I was just, in this one particular instance, I was telling them, okay, it's now crossing I-96. I mean, it's now 5 minutes away. You got to get them to stop this game and let you get that tarp on, because you're not going to get that tarp on easily with 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts. And this umpire, he was not going to stop the game until it was Hurricane Ethel. And I thought that was a very disingenuous decision, because the storm hit with those strong wind gusts. The grounds crew was trying to get that tarp out. They got it. They actually got the tarp unfolded, and some are standing on the edge trying to keep it from blowing up. and others are putting stakes in. And then a big gust of wind came. It whipped up the edge of the tarp. One of the grounds crew members got whipped out from under her and ended up tearing up her whole knee. I think meniscus, ACL, all sorts of stuff. And she had to have surgery. And so, I mean, sometimes the umpires just wait too long. And I understand them getting a little jaded sometimes because, and as a meteorologist, Chris, when you talk about scattered storms, a scattered storm, you have one here and you have one here. And if you tell them scattered storms, that doesn't mean you're going to get one, but it means you could. And so, as an old friend of mine said, well, maybe you have a 30% chance of scattered storms, but if one hits you, then it's a 100% chance. I mean, it's, so umpires sometimes don't always get scattered storms. And that's the challenging part of the forecast, is trying to tell them you may get one or you may not, because that's not a cop-out. It's, as you know, as a meteorologist, it's a real forecast. There are just a few of them around. And like I said, you may get one, you may not.
Yeah. And, that really makes me think, as we, have a storm system moving in, and in Colorado, I've been to baseball games in the snow. In Detroit, we've had baseball games in the snow. You have baseball games with light rain going on, where it's more of a nuisance than something that is really a concern. How do some of these weather events and weather phenomena impact play once a game's gotten started and you have a drizzle going on, or it's just a hot and humid day? How does that really impact the play of the game?
It's funny. I'm glad you asked that, because some of this is really obvious and some of it is not. So let's start with the obvious one. Obviously, when it rains, obviously your grass is getting slipperier and your infield is getting wet. Okay. Now with the outfield, if you have a wet grass and somebody hits a line drive, that ball is going to stay lower. It's going to skip and stay lower and not slow as much when it bounces, because again, that grass is slippery. So that's, you hit a ball between a couple of outfielders, maybe on dry conditions, one of them can cut it off, but in the wet conditions, that's going to go by them and skip right by them and go right to the wall. So there's strategic differences like that in terms, and then also obviously running the bases if it's slippery and things like that, running in the outfield if it's slippery. But most of the stadiums nowadays, I mean, they have pretty well draining outfields. So usually we're not looking at like flooding and that kind of concern in the outfield. It can happen if you get enough rain, but generally that doesn't happen. But what's interesting with the infield is the grounds crew, if it starts getting wet, they put this, and you've seen, I'm sure anybody who's been to a ball game where it's rained, you've seen them like with a shovel, even spreading out these shovelfuls of this, like spreading out this stuff. And it's like a stuff that absorbs moisture and kind of dries the top of the field. But what the fans don't realize is that they then have to hand remove that from the field after the game, or after a delay if they're not going to be resuming the game. And so that's a long process. So an umpire has a lot of decision making to make. We had a game at the end of the season this year here in Detroit where we knew it was going to rain. We had a little light rain at the start of the game, but we knew it was going to pick up during the game, and it was picking up, and it was just raining and raining and raining. And the Tigers had the lead, and as you know, 5 innings is a legal game. So if you're the home team and you've played 4.5, you can win if you're not going to be able to restart. Well, the Tigers were in the lead, and we needed just 3 outs, and it would have been a legal game. But the rain just kept coming down, and we were getting puddles on the infield. They were putting so much of that stuff out, and it just wasn't. You just couldn't put enough of it out anymore. And I was in the tunnel actually at that game with the grounds crew, and they literally were putting out bag after bag after bag of that stuff. But here's the thing. I told them, yeah, the rain was probably gonna be around for 2, 3, 4 hours, but it would, you have no place to move the game. It was the end of the season, so they tried to play, but then it just got too messed up. And then even when you took off the tarp, if you waited for the rain to end, the grounds crew still had to shovel up all of that stuff and to make it more playable again, and that was going to take another hour and a half. So we were just working to get that kind of break. But that's rain. Obviously, wind, I don't have to explain. If it's blowing in, it's going to make it harder to hit a home run. And if it's blowing out, well, that gives you a little bit of a jet stream there behind the ball that can help you with a home run. But here's the one that people don't realize. I wish that I had $1 for every person that went to a game on a hot, humid day saying, oh, it's so steamy and humid out here. The air is so heavy. It's going to be harder to hit a home run. It's just the opposite. When you have a humid day, that means there's more water vapor molecules in the atmosphere. water vapor molecules are less dense than air molecules. So actually the air is less dense when it's hot and humid, and the ball carries farther when you have a hot, humid day. So that's counterintuitive to some people. And then there's one other thing. When you have a hot, humid day versus a cold day, when a pitcher pitches, okay, the reason a curveball curves, it's something that we meteorologists know, and you know this, Chris, it's called the Magnus effect. That's when a thunderstorm becomes severe and it starts rotating, the storm suddenly turns to the right, okay? Same thing with a baseball. A pressure differential builds up, a higher pressure on one side of the ball, lower pressure on the other side of the ball as it's spinning toward the plate. That causes it to move. That's why the curveball curves. So in colder weather, those curveballs might have a little more bite, might have a little more break. And in real super hot, steamy weather, you're not going to get quite as much bite on those curveballs. So sometimes a cooler, drier air mass is a pitcher's friend.
I think I saw recently in the Journal of Weather, Climate, and Society, there was a study that looked at how many runs are scored in different types of weather conditions. And you know, the hot and humid ones, you get more run production because it is a little bit easier for the balls to get out. And as you just said, colder weather is a pitcher's friend sometimes. So
yep.
You know, there is a lot of really interesting research that's being done on weather and its effects on baseball. So you know, we just had one in BAMS recently as well. I don't know if you saw it, Paul, about climate change and baseball and how that's going to affect potentially home runs in the future. And you know, if we're getting more warm and more humid as a result of a changing climate, you know, we may have more home runs.
Absolutely. I mean, climate change, that would be the major impact. The only other major impact would be obviously the characteristics of big storm systems, because as the world warms, we evaporate more ocean water in the atmosphere. That increases our atmospheric humidity, and that atmospheric humidity, which is documented, it's going up. That humidity is what storms turn into precipitation. So big storm systems that come through with rain potentially are going to have more intense downpours with them. The extreme rainfall events are increasing, and that could have an impact on, excuse me, on postponing some games. So some of the rain events could get a little worse, which could be maybe the tipping point for certain games in terms of playing or postponing.
We have a lot to look forward to, I guess, as we continue to watch how the world evolves in a changing climate, especially if we are fans of baseball. Is that with a lot of potential impacts, whether it's hotter, more humid, whether it's more precipitation, more storms, we're going to either see more delays or we're going to see more home runs. And I hope it's probably the latter, because I don't always want to see a delayed game.
Right. You hate to see it, and the fans hate to see it. And as you know, those of us who are involved in, helping the teams with the weather and helping them make decisions, we don't want to see the delays either. But again, especially in the terms of storms, fan and player safety is very, very important. And that's always number one. And I will never regret any decision, even if it ends up being wrong, which isn't very often, but once in a while we get one wrong. And even if in an instance where we were expecting storms and we get that one wrong, I'd rather err on the side of player and fan safety than the other way around. Because think about it. Let's say you have a good team. So you've got 30,000 fans in the stands. And if for some reason you need to evacuate the place, or you have maybe, God forbid, a tornado coming or something, I mean, I'd rather err on the side of being prepared for that than have it the other way around.
Yeah, I think the safety aspect is a really critical one. We've seen before the regular season, so in spring training a couple of years ago, a father and a daughter were struck by lightning as they were leaving a Yankees game. The first baseball game after the COVID delay was a major thunderstorm during the game in Washington. Now, lightning is a significant hazard for baseball. What do you see as potential impacts of lightning, or how often do you see that as impacting games?
Well, obviously, you don't have to have a storm hit you to have lightning as a threat. And the basic rule of thumb is if you can see lightning or you can hear thunder, then lightning is close enough to hit you, no matter how far away it seems. And so, like I say, I forget what the Major League Baseball criteria are for lightning. I want to say it's either 5 or 10 miles. I forget. It's one of the two, and I can't remember, and I apologize. I don't remember. But in any event, or maybe it's 7 miles, whatever, but somewhere in that 5 to 10 mile range, if lightning is that close, then they have to stop play. And that's smart. And the rule is, it's the 30-30 rule. If you see lightning or hear thunder, you need to wait 30 minutes. And if you don't see lightning or hear thunder for 30 minutes, then it's safe to resume. And so that's what I preach, although sometimes the umpires like to start things up a little quicker if the storm's gone and moving away. But lightning scares me because unlike tornadoes and hurricanes and floods where, when people are killed, it's in the news and you see there's lots of destruction, lots of damage, lots of, people killed, whatever. When lightning picks off its victims, it's one by one. So if a person loses their life on a golf course in Colorado, then generally we're not going to hear about that here in Michigan unless we have dramatic video. You know how the news is. I worked in the news for 40 years. I know how the news is. But so unless there's dramatic video, you're generally not going to hear about that in Michigan, for example. Or let's say a person is mowing their lawn in Florida and they get hit by lightning. You're not going to hear about that in South Dakota. It's just, lightning does its work one by one typically. But people don't realize it's one of the top weather killers. And so we have to respect lightning. We have to give it all the respect that we can.
Yeah, I think that's really important because the majority of baseball games are played outside and they're played during the peak of lightning season. And there was a study in Weather, Climate, and Society, and I think it was about 1 in 14 games. So any time that all 30 baseball teams are playing on a given night, at least one of those games is going to have lightning within about 8 or 10 miles. So it's a major effect on the baseball season.
Yeah.
And you brought up tornadoes. We had a question come in. If there is an approaching tornado or significant lightning, how long does it take to clear the stands and to get people to safety?
Well, that's obviously going to be a factor for each individual stadium, and also on each individual stadium's operations manager or a safety manager, whatever you want to call the person, in terms of how soon do they start prepping the fans that we may have to move or whatever. But again, you definitely want to get everybody out of the upper decks and get people down as low as they can in the stadium. Now, I have also at some football games, outdoor stadiums, I was at a Michigan State football game once with my son, and we had it was actually a cold weather game, but we had a thunderstorm with sleet approaching. We had thunder, lightning, and sleet approaching, and they made an announcement, lightning is 5 miles away, we need to evacuate the stadium. And it's like, why can't we just all stand below? And we were in, being the visitor, we were in East Lansing for that. And I'm a Michigan fan. So we were, all of us Michigan alumni were like stuck in the upper back of the upper deck. So by the time we made our way finally down to the lower concourse about to exit the stadium, because it took so long because everybody all at once is trying to get out. The storm had already passed and it was moving quickly, and they said people could come back in. And so I did kind of stall a little bit because I was also advising the U of M football team on their weather, and I was texting them about what was going on with the storm and how long the delay would be. So I kind of stalled a little bit, but in some places they evacuate the stadium, but I don't see how that's practical. Again, if you can get people, because most people that are hurt or killed by tornadoes, the overwhelming majority of people hurt and killed by tornadoes are killed by flying debris. So, if you can get people, into the lower concourses, crouched down, and generally you don't have a lot of windows in a lot of stadiums. Some you do, but it depends if it's a dome stadium or not. But if you can get people to those lower levels and into some of the bathrooms and things like that, and taking cover that way, I think you can, because you can probably protect a lot of people. I mean, it would take a direct hit on the stadium by a tornado, and I think it would have to be a really, really strong tornado to like really, really compromise the integrity of the stadium. And so, and plus the other factor is if you evacuate, if you tell people you need to leave the stadium, where do people go? And where do you go to your car? That's less safe than being in the stadium if the tornado's coming. So, it's a real problem. I mean, it's a real problem. I mean, again, my recommendation would be to just have the people, if best you can, protect themselves from flying debris on the lowest level, lowest concourse.
Yeah, it's certainly something that is being thought of a lot more, with more and more sports teams and especially college teams having a meteorologist there during the game to really advise them. And I think we're seeing that a lot more frequently, really going from the weather forecasting to the decision support. And that's especially important for not just keeping people safe, but for keeping these events going with the minimal delays.
Sure. And I've seen back up until the present day, but back in the past, I mean, I have seen games. I remember seeing a game. I was watching a game. It was at Kansas City, and they had a whale of a thunderstorm going on, and you could see lightning beyond the stands, and rain was pouring so hard. Rain was pouring down the aisles and onto the field. I mean, and they were still playing the game. They finally stopped, but I think it was because of the rain, not the lightning. And I was just, no, you need to stop before that storms get there when the lightning is a threat. I mean, you need to be proactive. I mean, people's safety, again, public safety is job one for us meteorologists. So I'll always err on the side of caution.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned somebody that I remember from a long time back growing up in Detroit, Sparky Anderson, the great coach. I'm going to tie a question that's come into Sparky here, and it's a curiosity about how you got from graduation to where you are now, CBM, CCM fellow, advising the Tigers, advising the Wolverines, advising the Lions on weather. How did you get there? How did did Sparky call you up one day and say, hey, we need to know if there's going to be lightning, or was it just, I was a sports fan and I dove in, or, how did you become this Southeast Michigan sports weather guy?
Well, I'm a big sports fan, and I've never left here. I was born and raised here, went to the University of Michigan, studied meteorology, which is part of their College of Engineering. And then I was fortunate to be able to get a job right at the get-go, not on the air yet, but at my dream hometown station, Channel 4, WDIV. I was 7 years old, and I told my family I wanted to be a Channel 4 weatherman someday. And, I got to do that for 40 years. But anyhow, back in the mid-'80s, I was working there part-time. And I just happened to always be in the office when the grounds crew chief from the Tigers started calling, and I would tell him the weather, and we developed a relationship. And after a while, he and I just started one-on-one. I'd help him on off days. I'd help him whenever. I just said, listen, here's my cell. Call me whenever. And this is, again, by the late 80s, early 90s when we had cell phones. There was a time we didn't have cell phones. But it's really funny. Sparky Anderson was manager at the time. And one day, back in the, probably say early 90s, early mid 90s, perhaps, Sparky was in the station pushing a charity event. And long story short, I mentioned to him, Sparky, I work with Frank Fennick a lot, helping him with the weather. And Sparky didn't hear everything I said. He only heard me mention Frank Fennick, who was the grounds crew chief. And he starts just gushing about Frank, saying, oh, Paul, Frank Fennick is the most respected grounds crew chief in the entire American League. The umpires know he is the best. And I just look at him, that's great that our guy is like the most respected one. Well, why? What makes him, Sparky, what makes him, so respected by the umpires? And Sparky looked at me and he said, well, because the umpires know when they come here, no grounds crew chief has a better handle on the weather than Sparky. And I'm like, Sparky, or than me, than Frank Fennick. And I said, Sparky, come on, throw the dog a bone a little bit. Who do you think's been giving Frank all of those forecasts? And so, but after a while, it was just me and them. And then as far as briefly the Lions, I just called them one day and I said, how do I need to get weather forecasts to you guys. You have away games that are outside. And I just started doing it for them. And then the U of M team, Bo Schembeckler was actually the old coach, was in our building. And I asked him, and and he said, well, our equipment manager usually watches TV and gets the forecast, or something. It goes online and gets the forecast or something. And I'm just like, oh, come on, Bo, we can do a lot better than that. And I said, just give me a way to contact this guy. And so that's how I started advising the Wolverines on their weather. And man, there are a lot of stories. I don't know if we're gonna have time in this webinar, but I have a lot of stories I can share with all those.
Yeah, your story about the Michigan State game, got me thinking about whether that was the game where Tom Izzo was on the field and he told the students who didn't want to leave that if they left and went to shelter, that after the game started up again, he would join them in the stands to watch the game with them, because he, like you, like me, like a lot of us, was really concerned about keeping them safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the game, actually. I think it was.
Yeah. Well, because it is the World Series coming up, the Tigers have been in a couple of World Series in the last 30, 40 years, 1984, 2006. Do you have any good World Series baseball stories related to the weather and the Tigers?
Well, the big one was the 2006 World Series with the Tigers and the St. Louis Cardinals. And we had this massive rainstorm approaching. I mean, 24 hours of nonstop rain. And the way I had the timing, it was going to start within an hour of the end of game one and end within an hour or so of the beginning of game two. And because it was extraordinary. It was going to be absolutely historic because we had a day between games 1 and 2, because again, with the weather being what it is, up here in the north, you have to take into account that could happen. So sure enough, game 1 ended, whatever it was, 11 o'clock. And by midnight, 1 in the morning, the rain had moved in, and it rained all the way through. Actually, no, I think we were playing the next day. So maybe it wasn't exactly 24 hours, but it was rain continuously from 1 in the morning all the way to like 6:30, 7 o'clock the next night. And of course, the World Series game started at like 8:30. So it tapered off to drizzle by like about 7. And so they asked me, hey, listen, my wife and I had tickets for the game. So I was there. And or did we have tickets? No, I don't think I had tickets for that game. I think I was just there working it. And they asked me, can you be in a meeting with Major League Baseball at 6 p.m. because it was still raining at that point. And they said, sure. So I had to go into the umpire's room, which I've been in there before, behind home plate. And I walk into the umpire's room, and there's the head umpire. And then there's Joe Garagiola Jr., who worked for Major League Baseball. And there were the two managers. Jim Leland and Tony La Russa, both good friends in their, uniforms. And there were some of the umpires. And it's just, they all looked at me and said, well, I guess better start with the weather. And that was, what a moment. To be in the umpire's room with the two managers, and it worked out. The forecast worked out perfectly. And I told them, I said, this is all going to be tapering to a drizzle by game time, nothing worse than a little drizzle, and that'll even be ending. And I said, your biggest thing is actually going to be cold, because it's going to be like, I think it was in the 40s with a little wind. I said that damp, breezy conditions, 40s, it's going to be, pretty cold on the players. But obviously you're not canceling a World Series game unless, it's Hurricane Ethel. So, but that was quite a story. That was quite an experience. And that's been one of the fun things about this role, is that I've had several fun experiences.
Yeah, I can only imagine two of the giants of Major League Baseball, and Tony La Russa and Jim Leland. And
yeah, that was pretty special.
At least you didn't have to go in there and say, we're about to get a deluge.
Right. At least I had good news. Yeah, and the station wanted me to do a live shot, and I said, listen, I'm going to be in a meeting with MLB like at 6 p.m. Can you make my live shot like at maybe 10 after? Because obviously our whole first block of news was about the World Series. And they said, yeah, we'll shift you to the bottom of the block. So I got in, did my thing, and I just ran right out there, to our camera right behind home plate, and just put on the earpiece, and we were ready to go. It was crazy. It was insane.
Yeah. All right. I want you to, you're the new MLB commissioner. What changes or what do you implement to improve MLB's weather readiness?
Well, I think the umpires have gotten better at listening to the meteorologists. And I just wish not so much with just general light rain, things like that, but I think when you have a storm approaching, particularly with wind gusts that could make it dangerous for the grounds crew to get that tarp out, I think that my one request, we'll call it a request. My one request, Chris, would be please, please, please be more proactive about thunderstorms with strong wind gusts approaching and letting the grounds crew get that tarp on before the storm hits. I mean, hey, let's say the storm misses you by a mile. Okay, you pull it right off. It takes 3 minutes, 5 minutes to pull off that tarp. Just let them pull off the tarp. If the tarp's dry, they just fold it up, roll it up, and it's a piece of cake. So, and no, you don't. You've just had a minor delay. But if you don't tarp, you could get forgetting about the safety factor for a minute, you could just get so much rain in a short period of time that the grounds crew may have to do some repairing and working on the field after you pull the tarp off, which would cause an even longer delay. So that would be my request. Just, be more proactive about thunderstorms. And let me tell you, there was a case where a grounds crew member, they were putting out the tarp and he slipped and fell because the wind, I forget if it blew the tarp out or whatever. In any event, the tarp got rolled over him. I mean, he was under the tarp and that thing's heavy. And with rain coming down, it gets even heavier. You could literally suffocate. They literally had to go get a knife and cut him out of the tarp. I mean, he could have died. So, they quickly got a knife and cut him out of the tarp. So, you gotta give the grounds crew a chance to get that tarp on and get it secured before a strong storm hits. That's my big request. If we could take this thing to MLB.
I think I see somebody who's been in the audience here who might be able to do that. But we have a follow-up question going back to one of our previous discussions, and it sounds like you give personalized forecasts to the Tigers, to the Wolverines, to the Lions. Is that common to do for a lot of teams that are out there, to get personalized forecasts, or are they more like Bo's equipment manager who is going online to get something?
I think it's probably more common now that teams either have meteorologists, and it might be just a local TV meteorologist, or if the team is located in a town with a university that has a meteorology department, they might be just tapping into them. But I think because the stakes are so much higher nowadays, I think that more teams are looking at the weather as as something they need to, especially, I mean, in baseball, keep in mind that if a pitcher, let's say, starts a game and then you have a hour and a half rain delay that starts in the third inning, you've burned your starting pitcher. You could risk injury to the pitcher trying to get him to warm up again and then continue pitching. And that happened to the Tigers once. We went to Boston for a game. There was a massive, 8-hour rain blob heading right toward Boston. Why they started the game, beyond any comprehension that I can even come up with. And Justin Verlander, our ace pitcher at the time, was pitching. And so after the second, third inning, it started raining, and that was it. I mean, they finally had to call the game, but they burned his start. And of course, Justin now couldn't pitch for the next 5 days. He would start 5 days later. And so I do not know if gamesmanship was involved there or not. I heard that MLB might have actually been involved in the decision to start the game. But, if again, being here, I was not advising the Red Sox. If they had a meteorologist, I would hope that meteorologist was telling them, don't play this game. You're going to have rain coming in the first couple, 3 innings. You won't get a regulation game, and it's going to rain for 8 hours. So I would hope that most teams now, I would think that more teams than not are consulting with meteorologists. And again, now, baseball has their own meteorologists too. So at the very minimum, they've got those.
So that leads into this next question here. If teams are working with meteorologists and MLB has a team of meteorologists, why does the power to delay the game after it started lie with the umpires?
Because they're the kind of, we'll call it the governing authority of they're the governing authority of the game. Once that first pitch occurs, they are in charge of everything associated with the game. And so again, before that first pitch, the home team's general manager can make that decision. You know what? I don't want to start. We could, I mean, we got storms coming in the second or third inning, and even if they last an hour, we could lose our starting pitcher's start. Yeah, it's their choice. So again, there's some gamesmanship involved, but again, it's once that first pitch goes, it's the umpires, the crew chief in particular, who makes those decisions, and there's just no, it's the way it is. I mean, they are the deciding factor. They'll take whatever information that they want to take to synthesize into making a decision, but the umpires, it's their game. It's their game once that first pitch occurs.
If I remember correctly, it's Rule 403 in the official baseball rule book. That after the game starts, the crew chief is the guy in charge of the game. But I think they changed it a couple of years ago to where they added that if a team has submitted a hazardous weather plan to MLB before the start of the season, they can overrule the crew chief at that point.
Oh, I don't know about that. That I've never heard of. No. But I know that during games, there have been some games where I've been at home monitoring the weather, and the grounds crew chief, Heather Nabosny, she's put me on the phone with the umpire, and he's asked me some questions and made me made some decisions based on what I've told him and what she's told him. But I've trained her pretty good. I mean, she's a great, smart learner. She asks a lot of questions, and she's gotten pretty good. When I explain things to her, now frequently she can just explain it to the umpire as if I'm talking to the umpire. So, but I've been on the phone with umpires during some games, especially in the past.
I think if there were more teams that did that, I think we'd be a little bit better off, and we'd get some more games in, and we'd delay games at the right time, and keep everybody safe and keep the games flowing along. But I think we are trending in that direction. It does sound like that.
Yeah, and some umpires are good umpires. But there used to be an umpire. He's retired now, and he was young when he retired. Dale Scott was his name, and I mean, he's alive. He didn't die or anything. I mean, he just retired from umpiring, and he was one of my very, very favorite umpires, because he took the information. He wasn't a maverick or anything, and he made smart, proactive decisions based on what we were telling him, and didn't do anything unnecessary. But if it was a serious enough threat, and I showed reasonable confidence, I mean, he would take our advice and act accordingly. And I really loved working with him. And then and I don't say it in a negative way, there was Country Joe West. A lot of people know Country Joe. And back in the 2005 All-Star game, we had a shower coming for the 9th inning. And so in the middle of the 8th inning, Heather and I, the grounds crew chief, were behind home plate. And we ran out to kind of, to kind of catch him. He started walking out to the mound just to put the ball down on the mound, just decided to take a walk. He was the home plate umpire for the All-Star game. So he finally caught up to him at the mound, explained to him, and I said, now understand, Joe, the rain is going to come down. It's going to come down, some point in the 9th inning. It's going to come down pretty good. And he said, but how long is it going to last? And it's going to last like 3 minutes. And he said, but it's going to really come down. And he said, okay, but just a few minutes. I said, yeah. And he said, all right, we're playing through it, and then like he'd play through a hurricane, I think. But good old Country Joe, there wasn't much that fazed him. There was very little that fazed Country Joe. What a privilege, though, to have met him. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of umpires out there that, I think it would be really interesting to have those kind of conversations with.
Yeah.
Now, if, there is a bad weather forecast, you have a storm moving towards the game. The forecast is we've got this 8-hour blob of rain moving towards Boston. You got JV on the mound. How easy or how difficult is it to move that game up or move that game back to avoid that weather?
They obviously try not to do that, but this year they actually did get a little creative on that. In moving to double headers the next day, there was one game where we had a pretty solid chance, and I think it was a team that was only going to be in for 3 games for the whole season, and I think we had a pretty good chance for severe storms, a real high chance for severe storms in the late afternoon. It was a day game, and so what they decided, they moved the start. Actually, they moved the game time. It was a 4:00 game, and obviously, heat of the day, that's when the storms were going to be hitting, and they were going to be pretty bad, and so they actually moved the game up to, I think, 1:10. And or noon, I can't remember, and we got that game in with no problems. And then again, the storms came later, and oh god, they had a ton of rain and a lot of wind and lightning, and and it was a good call. It was a good call. So they're getting, I think, a little more flexible on that. And with double headers the next day, you can do a day nighter where you do a 1 o'clock game and like a 7 o'clock game. Or sometimes they just do a straight doubleheader, like when you and I were kids, Chris, where you get 2 for the price of 1. Although now it's not 2 for the price of 1, because if you have tickets for the canceled game, your tickets are good for the first game the next day. But and then the people that have tickets for the next day's game or have tickets for the night game. But sometimes they'll do a straight doubleheader, and they'll actually do a game like at noon or 1 o'clock, and then 20 minutes later, 40 minutes later, whatever it is, you start the next game. But they're getting a lot more because they're trying. And listen, these players, they play a 162 game season. That is a lot of baseball. And you could argue it's not nearly as strenuous a sport as hockey and basketball and football, especially football. But with hockey and basketball, that's an 82 game season. And baseball is 162. And that is just a lot of wear and tear. And the players have some off days, and they try hard not to steal those off days. So I think they are getting a little better at saying, well, let's do a double header and not burn the off day so I think I'm just noticing maybe just a slight trend, a slight shift toward trying to protect some of those off days that the players really do need pretty badly.
Yeah. And if you are aware that inclement weather is coming, are you briefing people ahead of time, or are you really only communicating during the game?
Oh, no. I'll tell, like, if I know that we're going to have trouble the next day, I'll tell the grounds crew chief the day before, or even sometimes a couple days before, hey, Thursday's day game, we're going to have issues. And she'll know, she'll know, and she'll start talking about with MLB and with the umpires, and they'll figure out what, they won't move a game that far in advance, but they'll have their contingency plan in place. They'll have the contingency plan in place and figure out, what they're going to do. And so, yeah, no, I'll tell them. I mean, if it's going to be a significant, if you're just talking about a line of thunderstorms coming through, I mean, I'll tell her maybe the day before, hey, we'll probably have some storms come through the game tomorrow, but that's not something you fine tune until you get, into the next day. But for the big storm systems where you're talking about hours and hours and hours of rain, that, yeah, I'll definitely give them heads up on that a couple, 3 days ahead of time, at least. And, they can start looking at what the contingency plans are.
I think, continued improvements in forecast models and new and better data really help you to make those sorts of calls.
Yep, and radar scope on our phones in the palm. Well, you can't. Oh, here we are in the palm of your hand. Having that radar in the palm of your hand. And the grounds crew chief, I've taught her all about all that. She even knows what outflow boundaries are and things like that. I mean, it's been a great time of learning over the 22 years we've worked together. And so she'll sometimes pull out the phone and show the umpire, yeah, this is the storm that he's talking about, and this is making a direct bead on us. Yeah.
Oh. I think we've had a really good discussion here over the last 45 minutes or so, and a lot of great questions from the audience. I've got a question here. What is your forecast for the World Series?
Well, as I mentioned, tomorrow, again, they have domes, so I haven't looked at it that carefully because the weather is not going to impact either team, or either city that the games are in. But they're going to have some thunderstorms down there tomorrow. So that's a key day, but again, that with the roof, that shouldn't affect things unless something, true act of God were to occur. So, and then when they get to Phoenix, oh my God, the weather's going to be great. It's going to be like 80 degrees for highs. That means it's falling through the 70s, probably through the 70s, maybe even in the 60s by the end of the game. So it's going to be very pleasant, very, very nice out in Phoenix for the games out there. Yeah, it's going to be a great World Series. I really think it's going to be a great World Series.
Yeah, that sounds like a great change of pace for Phoenix after their summer of the hundreds with 133 days over 100 degrees, and I think it was 54 days over 110. So the Diamondbacks, they may have a little bit of an edge there, having played in the heat all summer long, and now they get to play in something reasonable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess you could say that they're conditioned for the nicer weather. I guess I don't know, but yeah. I mean, the games all start in the evening, so probably 70s for the game, 70s into the 60s by the end of the game for the evening. Oh, well, actually, wait, no, with the time change out there, because, again, the country runs on Eastern time. I mean, sorry for those of you in the West. That's just the way, the country runs with a lot of sporting events. So actually, if the games are starting out there like at 6:30 or so, so yeah, it still might be near 80, upper 70s for the start of the games, maybe upper 70s, and then like I say, falling sharply through the game, but it's still comfortable.
Yeah. Paul, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us to talk about weather and baseball, especially as we're getting into the World Series here. We've answered a lot of great questions from the audience, and if there are any other questions, feel free to share them, and we'll get them answered here. But if not, play ball.
Yeah, play ball. That's right. Like I say, it'll be a great World Series.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both so much for this discussion tonight. It was great to hear from you, Paul, and to hear all your questions, Chris. Really fun. Glad you both were here. For those of you joining us, if you've got more questions, if you're AMS or Weatherband member, you can continue the discussion on the Weatherband community. For those of you just joining us now and you want the recording, AMS and Weatherband members are going to be able to have access to this recording at amsweatherband.org. And then in about 3 months, it'll be available for the public. I'd like to thank you all for coming to tune in with us tonight. And thank you both, Chris and Paul, for tonight's discussion.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Glad to do it.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.